Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Stepanovich,
Here.
Mr. Diakopoulos,
Here.
Mr. McKenna,
Here.
Mr. Olszewski,
Here.
Mr. Dice,
Here.
Mrs. Ling,
Present.
Mr. Lemak,
Here.
Mayor Sinan.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. Nestico, do we have any unlisted amendments this evening?
None for this evening.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our consent calendar items. Just the minutes tonight. Any questions or concerns about the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve minutes from September 17th, 2024. All consent calendar items, that's it.
Second.
Thank you, Jamie and Eli. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. It is unanimous. That brings us to comments by the mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Dice. We start off with the first announcement tonight is congratulations to Herb Yingling for being inducted into the Franklin Regional Hall of Fame, which I attended last Friday. And at their social gathering afterwards, I read a proclamation declaring September 27, 24 as Herb Yingling Day, proclamation number 22624. Herb Yingling has contributed more than 40 years of volunteer service to the Franklin Regional School District, Municipality of Murraysville, and local organization. Upon his retirement, he has been inducted into the Franklin Regional Hall of Fame, honoring his 18 years of service on the school board and many years of service to multiple school committees to include curriculum, legislative representative, NWCTC, policy, ESBA liaison, safety, technology, wellness, WIU board representative, and the Panther Foundation. Herb volunteered more than 36 years in the athletic department, not only scheduling and managing high school sports, but devotedly supporting student athletes at all levels and cheering from the sidelines at as many games as humanly possible. And Herb also served the municipality for 20 years as the Franklin Regional School District liaison to the Parks and Recreation Committee, helping to grow and promote Murraysville parks and programs, and happily volunteering at community events. He also contributed his experience and talents for more than 40 years to multiple community groups, including Communities, Inc., the American Legion, the Murraysville Economic and Community Development Commission, and the Mother of Sorrows Church Council. Herb was a 2009 RAUW Educational Foundation honoree, Murraysville Volunteer of the Year, a recipient of the Jefferson Volunteer Award, and a 99-2000 Franklin Regional Excellent Award winner. I, Regis Sinan, Mayor of Murraysville, in concert with the Council of the Municipality of Murraysville, recognize September 27, 2024 as Herb Yingling Day, recognizing service above self and encouraging all residents to follow his lead by giving back to their school and community. Okay, that finishes that little part. Next, we have the curbside leaf collection program coming up here. Leaves are falling pretty heavily. To schedule a pickup, one of the collection dates listed below. Please fill out the curbside leaf collection program form. It's on the website. There's a 20-bag limit. The deadline to sign up for each date is Thursday before the fall pickup. And the first one's coming up here on Saturday, October 19th. Lastly, Murraysville Trick or Treat will be on Thursday, October 31 from 6 to 8 p.m. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And congrats to Herb Yingling. That's well-deserved. That brings us to comments by the Chief Administrator. Mr. Nestico?
Yes, just a few updates for this month. First is, as the community is probably aware, there are various road projects going on within the community. We've gotten some feedback here in the building as well, so we're certainly aware of some of the disruptions that are being caused to local traffic. The projects that are currently underway, or through the gas company or even through the state, on School Road South and some other areas. So we just want to make the community aware that we recognize there are some disruptions to local travel. Unfortunately, these projects are all kind of happening simultaneously, but hopefully they will all be wrapping up soon, each of the various projects. There are municipal projects that are going to be taking place, but right now everything else is somewhat out of our control. So just want to acknowledge to the community that we are aware of some of the disruption. To the extent that we can have any control or input on the timing of these projects, we'll continue to work with the various entities. But some of it is a little bit out of our control, but we do know that it is creating some disruption. So in that same spirit, the Old William Penn Bridge repair is going to be starting on October 14th. That is the bridge that is located in front of the Griff's Ice Cream Parlor on Old William Penn. When the project begins on Monday the 14th, the detour will take effect for all vehicular traffic in that area. The detour will be posted. I believe it's going to be on Klein Hollow, or even out, I'm drawing a blank on some of the roads that they have the detour posted on. But nonetheless, that information will be available on our website. It will be posted, and the contractor expects the project to wrap up before Thanksgiving. We're hoping that that occurs. If so, that'll be a welcome aspect of the project, considering it was initially anticipated to be 60 days. Again, that is a full closure, so no traffic will be able to go through there. However, once the project is completed, it will improve the load rating on the bridge. And so not only will regular vehicle traffic be able to go through there, but the school buses and some of the other heavier traffic will also be able to pass on that bridge as well. So that begins on the 14th, and we're hoping that it's wrapped up by Thanksgiving. One other item of note, just to make the community aware, certainly it's election time and political signs are popping up everywhere, and we recognize that. The only location that the municipality is enforcing prohibitions is on the Route 22 median. That is a major safety concern for people going out onto the roadway, placing signs in the median. It's dangerous for our folks, our staff, to go out there and remove any signs. It's also obviously a distraction for drivers as well. But we've talked to the various political groups in the community, made them aware. PennDOT has been enforcing some of the signage requirements that they have in their right-of-way. But from a municipal standpoint, we just want to make sure that the community is aware. We know that there are a lot of folks that have signs and place signs throughout the community that may not be directly involved with some of the political groups. We respect and appreciate that. We just ask that people don't place signs in the median on Route 22. We have to have our crews remove them, and there are safety concerns associated with that. So, and then the last item to mention is we did receive some feedback here in the municipality, and also some of the council members received feedback about a property located on Stewart Street. Typically, we don't address individual properties at a council meeting, but in this particular case, I think it made some waves on social media. There were some alarming things said about that property relating to the folks that are residing there and some of the potential criminal activity that may be taking place. We looked into it. Our police have not gotten any calls there about any criminal activity. We are aware that the property owner is trying to evict the tenants at that location. That is a process. There are legal rights afforded to people that are tenants or even squatting at a property. The sheriff has been there and posted the property. So the landlord is aware. They are trying to remove the tenants that should not be there. As far as property maintenance concerns, our code officer has gotten in contact with the property owner to address those concerns. So again, I try not to bring up individual properties at council meetings, but this one seemed to get a little bit more traction within the community, so we felt it was necessary to just advise the community that the police are aware of the concerns that were voiced. They haven't received any feedback. If anything does occur, please feel free to call. And they will be kind of monitoring that area just to ensure the safety of the residents in that area. So that's it for the Chief Administrator's report. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, council, questions or concerns for Mr. Nestico?
No.
Okay. Moving on, that brings us to community input. Verdale, you don't have to get up if you don't want to. Would you like to speak, Jenny? Okay, thank you. Good to see you, Jeanette. That brings us to liaison comments and committee reports. Let's start on this end. Jason?
Oh, thanks, Dane. The Murraysville Library meets on the 16th of October. One of the events that they've recently announced is their Huts for Pages. It's a fundraiser where they're going to set up a miniature golf course within the library. There's a family, it's November 23rd, the daytime is for families, and the evening is for adults only, 21 plus, so there'll be food, adult beverages, raffle baskets, so they're pretty excited about that event. And I can give an update on the other items going on there after the 16th meeting.
Medic One met on September 19th. The subscriptions are at 27%, which is just a little bit less than the preceding year. In the month of August, they delivered 3 babies, 2 on the same day. They were active in a cardiac arrest at one of the Panther football games, which was certainly a good thing. Just as a note, I had the assumption that it was a tax-exempt organization. It is not. It's a private business. Also, it's interesting that there are a certain amount of funds that they acquire by being on hurricane standby. They were not active or were not asked to be on Hurricane Helene, but if they were, they would have been available there. A very important thing is that there is going to be 4 additional receptors preemption, meaning when the Medic One and the fire station at Sardis gets a call, they come out onto Sardis, and if they're heading towards Old William Penn Highway and possibly and oftentimes right onto 22, there's been some problems with the turning of the lights to facilitate movement of the emergency vehicles through that. What's been decided and acted on to a certain degree so far is the purchase of 4 additional detectors, 2 at the Old William Penn and Sardis location, and the other 2 at the Vincent Hall Route 22 location, and it has yet to be installed, but once they are, the total cost will be in the range of $10,000. There was a meeting on September 16th of the Murraysville Parks and Recreation Foundation. The Stroll magazine issue in October will contain the advertisement for the foundation. We are in the process of gifting and naming rights to establish that. There is work on what will be a natural playground in Murraysville Community Park. One thing to note there is that the playground itself will have a mulch bed in the neighborhood of 6 inches deep. The estimate of the cost on that is in the range of $10,000. Next meeting is October 28th.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Matt?
Parks and Recreation did not have a meeting last month, and we meet next Tuesday. The only thing is this week it went out on social media that the pickleball courts at Kovalchek are finished, so huge shout out to the Public Works Department and for all their work up there, and kind of it's what the community was asking for, and they turned out really, really nice, so I think people are going to be excited to use them.
That's awesome.
And it's a park where maybe a lot of people haven't been before, so I think that we're going to see some traffic there. So that's a great thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Jamie?
The next Planning Commission meeting is Tuesday, October 8th.
Okay, awesome. Matt?
Thank you. The Environmental Action Committee September meeting was postponed, was canceled. So it'll be the end of October, the next updates.
Cool. Okay.
And no update on the pension fund until the November meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, and FTMSA continues. The list of work I have here is just unbelievable upgrades to the system as a whole. They're going to come give us a presentation somewhat soon in regards to the upgrades to the plant. They have actually totally redone it. Wes, you probably could even say it better than me. They have redone the entire system to make it, I believe, anaerobic.
Right.
Yep, to just make it more effective. And
That is correct.
the amount of engineering that went into that is just amazing. So TBD there. With that being said, we will now get into our workshop items. And we're going to start tonight with a discussion regarding the adoption of a stormwater management fee, otherwise known as an MS4 fee. So Michael, do you maybe want to lead us off?
Sure, I can do that. Let's see where to begin. So I've had some discussion individually with council members over the course of the last week or so. So I'll try to open this discussion up and try to provide a little bit of an overview. Certainly if I'm omitting anything, feel free to interrupt me or ask any questions along the way. This should be a pretty thorough and robust discussion by the time we're done. So hopefully I'll be able to touch on every topic that this incorporates. But in the meantime, like I said, if I'm going too quickly or if I'm glossing over something that needs a little bit more explanation, please feel free to stop me. But what we're looking at is consideration for an ordinance to adopt a stormwater fee. Certainly that's something at the outset that we acknowledge that the community certainly probably isn't going to be much interested in hearing about another fee. We recognize that, and we understand that certainly during these times, any additional fee within the community is probably going to be unwelcome. The economy and the economic constraints placed on homeowners, businesses, property owners in general are certainly real, and we recognize that. Unfortunately, we're kind of also feeling the brunt of that as well. The cost of maintaining our stormwater system is going up as well. The cost of materials, the cost of labor, the overall upkeep of the system is impacting us much the same. In Murraysville, and I can get into a little bit about what our stormwater system is, but I'll start by saying that in Murraysville, our current stormwater system is maintained primarily through our Public Works Department, and the cost of maintaining that system has been absorbed most often by the general fund budget. We're kind of to a point now where the costs to maintain that system, the requirements implemented by the state, and the needs of the overall stormwater system that we have, our infrastructure as a whole, the cost probably isn't going to be able to be met by the general fund budget much longer, and that's why we are asking council to consider the implementation of a fee. Our stormwater system is comprised of a number of different aspects of stormwater management. It includes all the pipes and the inlets and the culverts. It includes the ditches along the side of the road, storm ponds in various neighborhoods. There are roughly 65 municipally owned storm ponds. And all of the water that filters through the system and filters into the community is ultimately discharged into the streams and ultimately the Turtle Creek watershed. We are under permit through the DEP, under what's called an NPDES permit, to eliminate pollutant discharge into that stream system and into the rivers and the water courses in this area. And so the requirements of the state mandate upon us to maintain that system to a certain degree and to continue to make improvements to that system, reducing infiltration, reducing the pollutants and contaminants, and continue to make improvements along the way for adequate stormwater flow in the community. And so I can go through, I guess the best way to break this out is to probably address some aspects of what our stormwater system incorporates. As I said, it's inlet pipes, ditch work, storm ponds, and the costs of maintaining those various items and the overall expenditures on an annual basis probably fall in the range of anywhere on the very conservative end of $500,000 a year to probably the more realistic $700,000 to $800,000 a year. If we were aggressively addressing our system and keeping up with some of the permit requirements, the state requirements, we may be even in the range of over $1 million a year. And so the cost of maintaining this system is mostly dependent upon how aggressive we want to be in addressing the state requirements and addressing the overall system itself. Right now, we dedicate about 1 month out of the year, if we can, to having the Public Works crew go out and really barrel in and hone in on stormwater repair projects. A lot of that is ditch work, clearing out the sides of the roads, cleaning all of that debris up. We also address storm ponds throughout the year. We do that usually through a contractor. We address anywhere between maybe 2 to 3 ponds a year. That gets us on a schedule of around every 20 years to do retrofits on those ponds. State guidance suggests that we should be maintaining ponds and retrofitting them every 5 to 10 years. So we're behind schedule on some of those items. We dedicate about 1 month out of the year for our Public Works crew to really buckle down on stormwater and storm flow repair projects. But we have other things that are falling through the cracks as well. Our system isn't mapped very well. We run into issues with PA1 calls and marking the system. We have difficulty at times locating some of our storm pipes and our culverts, our inlets. There are some outfalls within the community that are mapped. We also have some that are not mapped. So there are a number of components to our stormwater system, but up until this point, without a dedicated source of funding, we've tried to generally address the concerns each year while trying to maintain compliance with the state. And again, like I said, I think we've crossed that threshold to where we now have a need to have a fee in place that allows us to properly address the stormwater system. The benefits of addressing it certainly will be felt by the community when we have major stormwater events. The more efficient that our system is running, the more effective that the ponds are and the ditches, the less likelihood of flood events and damage to roads, infrastructure, and even private property. So stormwater is something that stormwater systems are located in many municipalities throughout the state. There are around 100, at a minimum 100 municipalities that have stormwater fees. There are fees that are implemented by nearby communities, Plum, Monroeville, and others. The fees, I'm hesitating to get into the billing side of it or the fee side of it, as I'm kind of saving that to have a more comprehensive explanation, but the fees may be anywhere from $5 to $10 per month for the average residential home. For non-residential properties, that fee can accelerate to a much higher amount depending on how much impervious surface they have. And that kind of gets to the heart of some of the discussion that I want to present to council this evening, which is in order for us to try to adequately examine what our fee structure should be, I think the first step in that process would be to move forward with an aerial survey of the community. That's typically what municipalities will do to try to get a handle on how much impervious surface they have in their community. There are firms out there that can assist with that. We may have the potential to do it internally through our engineering department, but essentially, whoever does it, it comes through essentially GIS mapping and doing an analysis of the impervious surface for not only residential properties, but also the non-residential properties in the community. That includes businesses, nonprofits, churches, schools, et cetera. So any property owner in the community that has impervious surface is in some fashion discharging into the stormwater system. And so the state requires that if a fee is set, that it be assessed equally or equitably across the board to both the small and large properties, essentially dependent upon your impervious surface. So that is a very, brief rundown of what the components are of a stormwater fee and an ordinance. I'm certainly happy to elaborate further and dive into some of those topics, but that provides a general overview of what I think we're looking at from a municipal standpoint, and what we wanted to kind of begin discussion with in front of council this evening. So I can certainly continue to elaborate further on the fee structure side of things. I can get into some of the requirements that we have with the state, or even some of the costs that we have in maintaining the system. But I want to maybe pause for a moment and see if there are any initial questions based on what I've said, or anything that kind of leads the discussion in a different direction. Certainly open to any feedback from council.
Just, I presume that the storm sewers and so forth are totally divorced from the sanitary sewers?
Yes, that's right. It's considered MS4, which is a municipal separate storm system. And so it is separate from the sewage. Any place that there were tie-in, the goal and through the sewage authority is to separate and keep sewage away from water. So at this time, if there are combined systems in the community, the goal is to separate them out. But what we are talking about is purely the stormwater side of our infrastructure.
I have a question, Mike. Just understand the infrastructure of that. So when a planned residential development or commercial development occurs, the infrastructure that's put in for the stormwater, is it initially done by the developer and then we absorb all that cost after that? Is that kind of how?
Well, the infrastructure, every development's a little bit different, but generally speaking, when a developer comes in, the stormwater controls that they put on their property are maintained typically privately, but it discharges into our system, which ultimately creates the infiltration or the inflow and the strain on our system. So if you take a big plaza that has a big parking lot with stormwater control there, the inlets located there might be privately owned, the pipes underneath that parking lot might be privately owned, but ultimately they are flowing to what would be our system. Either our system, our network of pipes, trenches, ditches, whatever it may be, storm ponds. And so there are also private ponds within the municipality. And again, those are privately maintained. Some HOAs or even some businesses have a private storm pond. So they may have their own contained infrastructure that discharges to a pond that is privately owned and privately maintained. And that would not be part of, again, our maintenance responsibilities. But by and large, even private infrastructure for a development or a residential property ultimately ties in some fashion to our system. And even if there are properties discharging stormwater over a hillside or down an embankment, ultimately it's going to run down into a stream or a culvert or something of that nature. So sometimes the private system does incorporate into the public system.
And we've seen a lot more of where you used to get consistent rain. That's probably, with some of the intense rain we have, it puts a lot more stress on that system, I would assume, right?
Yeah, and when it does that, ultimately it just requires Public Works to go out and it puts a strain on them to unclog ditches and pipes and to kind of open things up, remove trees and debris. And I would say, obviously Bill's here. If we need to ask him any questions, I'm sure he'd be willing to answer that. But I know that certainly the inconsistent rainfall that we get does lead to more strain on Public Works because they're being called out for unexpected events. It's not as routine as I guess it has historically been.
So just to make sure I understood what you had said earlier, so the current infrastructure is paid out of the general fund?
That's right.
So if we are considering looking at creating a separate fund by this potential new revenue stream?
That's right, good question. So in the state guidance that's provided regarding stormwater fees states explicitly that any stormwater fee that's generated in a municipality must go into a separate fund only to be used for stormwater. So that's exactly what would happen. Right now, I say it comes out of our general fund, but if you recall just a month or so ago, we bought a piece of equipment that we use for ditch work, primarily for stormwater management. And in that case, the expenditure came out of our capital reserve. So we use our general fund primarily, but we're also using other funds to try to compensate for the costs that we're facing. But if a fee is implemented, that fee would be collected and segregated, completely separate from any other funds, and would only be used for stormwater projects.
Well, with that fee, would there still be money taken from the general fund, Or will money transfer from the general fund to the special fund?
You're saying to continue to do stormwater projects?
Right.
It would be the goal to use that fund, the stormwater fund, to complete all of the projects necessary. Certainly there will be some overlap when you talk about public works staff and their salaries coming in under the public works department, but yet they go out and conduct stormwater work and maintenance. So there could potentially be overlap, but we would primarily use the stormwater fund for all those expenses. If we needed pipe, if we had to conduct repairs or purchase equipment, that would all come out of that fund. The staff salaries and benefits and things like that would likely still be nested in the general fund under the Public Works umbrella. But it is possible that if we found the need to bring employees over into that stormwater fund to compensate them, or if we had the need for more staff, it could certainly be taken out of there. But I think at the outset, we would probably just keep the salaries and benefits on the Public Works side and look to the stormwater fee probably for more of the maintenance responsibilities, the equipment purchases, and things like that.
With respect to, is there anything that's been done by FTMSA with respect to mapping that we could utilize? And this might be a question for Bill or for Dane, with what FTMSA has done, because they've done it recently, mapping, I know that.
They have. Now, I believe that much of their mapping is of their own system, of the sanitary system. They certainly have the capacity to assist us with mapping, and that may be something that could be a joint project down the road if we wanted to engage their services to do some of that mapping. I believe as of right now, the only mapping that they've done, or at least primarily most of the mapping they have done, is on the sanitary side. The municipality used to have an intern 5 years ago or so, and that intern was in the engineering department, and they conducted some mapping of the stormwater system. They would go out and identify where the inlets were, some of the pipes, and put that information into our GIS system. The difficulty that we faced is a lot of that was surface level mapping. So if there were pipes underground, sometimes we don't know which direction those pipes are running. We might be able to locate where a pipe begins, but we're not quite sure where it moves to underground, or even where some outfalls are. So the intern that did some of that mapping got a portion of the system mapped. From a percentage standpoint, I hesitate to say a specific number, but it was probably somewhere in the range of 20 to 40% of the system. It's not a full, thorough mapping of it. It gave us kind of a baseline idea of where we have our infrastructure, but not completely mapped. And so that would, again, be another component of what this fee would go toward. Once we can adequately map the system, whether we have to camera lines or identify lines through CCTV or whatever it may be, we'll know a lot more about our infrastructure. We'll also know a lot more about what we have in the ground, where things are running, and even, as you alluded to, whether we have any mislabeled connections that might still be combined systems somewhere underground. So that would all be part of kind of the goals of implementing a fee, is to try to really hone in on the mapping side of it, the GIS side of it, identifying where things are in the system, and locating that on a map so that when we do have, again, it relates to emergency events as well. When we do have a stormwater event, if Public Works can see, where things are mapped out, they might be able to better address and more quickly address stormwater emergency situations that require a quick response. I think it would certainly be a benefit to them to be able to know the lay of the network underground, or where water's flowing to. So it's all a component.
No surprise. One, it says that we operate under the MPDES permit, which must have just gotten approved this April, right? If it expires in 2029.
That's right. The most recent permit, yes.
Right. So obviously we passed all of the requirements to get that permit. In addition, I'm sure there's a fee associated with getting the permit, right?
That's right. The annual fee is $2,500 a year, so over the life of the 5-year permit. You're looking at over $10,000, $12,500 to be specific. It is a 5-year permit, and there are requirements to continue to improve your stormwater system throughout those 5 years, and then the issuance of a new permit, the same requirements are in place. It's a way for the DEP to kind of keep tabs on things and monitor our work.
So this is a way of looking at anticipating a possible failure in the future, is to just be a little bit more proactive.
That's certainly one aspect of it, yes.
Okay, second question that I have, it was brought up about new construction. Are we going to start requiring mapping, the GIS of the new construction as part of an ordinance so that we're not having to do that at our cost then?
Yes, that's a good question. So right now, when a development comes in, we do have maps, whether digital or even the Mylar copies, of the various the situation right now internally is that goes to our engineering tech, who will try to plug that information into our GIS system. So that's one area where we are kind of staying on top of it currently. It's not necessarily helping us be proactive out in the rest of the system, but we are inputting any information, any new information that's provided to us that is being put into the system. But again, if we have a map of a new commercial development, we may know where some of the stormwater inlets are and some of the pipe network underground there, and we may know where it connects into our system. But again, from there, then that's where it kind of falls short in some areas. So we have that being mapped, but that only gets us so far.
For the residential properties or the commercial properties that are off-putting their stormwater into their own stormwater management system, would they be looking at getting like a credit or a discount or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So there are certainly ordinances out there that have a credit system. I pulled some of that information just to be it's kind of clear on what that could. The municipalities will offer credits for what they call peak flow attenuation. There are others for education credits, meaning if you're, I guess, engaging in educational awareness in some fashion, and even all the way down to rain barrel credits we've seen in some communities. So that isn't something that I've thoroughly examined yet, other than to know that there is a process for that. So if as we move forward, if there is a desire to move down the path of considering this fee, that would be one of the things that we will be looking at in the ordinance is, are there ways to provide residential or non-residential property owners the ability to obtain credits for improvements that they make on their own property? And certainly it's a benefit to the municipality, because the more stormwater that we can keep out of the system, the overall benefit to the system and the community. So that is something we will look at. That would be incorporated into the ordinance. Probably once we, again, identify whether there's a desire to go down this path and implement a fee and start to look at how the fee will be assessed, what type of fee, or I guess what that cost would be to a property owner. Then we can start to identify what type of credits may be able to be offered and how we would implement that. Because again, if there is a credit system, that's going to require some kind of communication between us and the property owner. And so we want to make sure that we don't create a situation where it inundates the municipality, but we also want to be reasonable and try to provide an opportunity to help reduce the inflow into the system. So again, a good question. I probably don't have the best answer for right now, but I think there is an opportunity to incorporate something like that into an ordinance.
A piggyback to that question is, so I feel like it was on Klein Hollow, a few of the plans that came in front of us before. You're talking like those tanks underground that take the water and then slowly disperse it out.
Yeah.
Those are on individual properties. We're not talking about like a planned residential development has to have a stormwater management plan in effect and whatever.
That's
You're
right.
talking more something a specific property owner does to reduce or eliminate?
That's exactly right. I would say it's more of an individual basis as opposed to somewhat of like a developmental thing. Now, again, there may be an opportunity for something like that. I can't say that I know for sure, but what I've referred to there in my explanation, it relates more to individual property owners and efforts that they might be able to take to reduce their own individual runoff.
I have one more question. The size and, sorry, did I steal your?
I wasn't done.
No, go ahead, you finish, and then I'll ask.
Okay. Before I lose my train of thought.
Piggyback yours, you're right.
Okay, yeah, and you just took it over.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So I was looking over the impact on budget operations, and it looks like there was a lot of work put into kind of a formula, as it were, to estimate what the cost would be for the impervious service that's present by square footage. My question is, the CIP that was already approved earlier this year already had a line item for an estimate for that. So is that estimate, knowing that this is something that the state essentially is like mandating, is that estimate in line with what your anticipated annual cost would be for dealing with the problems?
Yes, but I'll answer that a little bit more thoroughly, so hold your question, Mac, and maybe write it down. This one could be a little bit long, but I'll answer that and also address the fee structure as well. I think that's very important. We're kind of to that point now where I think this is important to explain. So as it relates to the CIP, yes, the anticipated cost that was put in the CIP was kind of an estimate based purely on the needs of our system and the expenditures that we anticipate on an annual basis. Now, that number could certainly fluctuate, as I mentioned before, depending on how aggressive we want to be on some of the stormwater improvements. But as it relates to the fee, I think that to answer your question specifically, we would need to do an analysis of our community and try to identify, I'll get into the nuts and bolts of what is called an EDU or an ERU, an equivalent residential unit, meaning what is the average impervious surface at a residential property. And once that is determined, that's a square footage amount, somewhere anywhere between, say, 2,200 to 3,200 square feet in various municipalities. That number kind of establishes your baseline for how you set your fee. The single-family residential home is assessed at essentially one ERU, one equivalent residential unit, regardless of square footage, but the number is established kind of by an assessment of the overall community. And then from there, non-residential properties are assessed a fee of a number of ERUs depending on their size. So if an ERU is, say, 3,000 square feet and a property is 30,000 square feet, then they're going to be 10 ERUs. And you can kind of do the math from there. So we won't know our true budgetary or revenue expectations until we do a true analysis of the impervious surface. And so that kind of ties all this together. In order for us to move forward and consider the stormwater fee and establish an adequate budget and understand our revenue expectations, we really need to do an analysis of the impervious surface, really drill down on what constitutes one ERU, and then from there, once we know the amount of impervious surface, then we can establish whether that fee is a couple dollars or up to, we'll say, $10 a month per ERU. So if we are able to establish that, we can establish some of our revenue expectations, then it would obviously change things in the capital reserve budget as well. But for the time being, since the fee isn't in place, the budget figure set in the capital reserve was based purely on the expenditure side of things and how much we expect the stormwater system to cost on an annual basis. And I hope that answers your question, but I can certainly go into it further.
What is that amount on an annual basis that you're expecting?
Well, under the CIP, and I don't have it in front of me, I think the number was 800,000, and I could be mistaken. I think that, again, I provided council with a little bit of an update in the briefing. If I were on the most conservative of estimates, and I'll kind of go through this and ask me if you have any questions. But I'll kind of go through this as simple as possible. On the most conservative of estimates, we're probably over $500,000 a year annually, and I'll tell you what that incorporates. That's the DEP permitting fee. That would be 1 month of road berming. Historically, the Public Works Department tries to do about 1 month's worth of road berming work. That cost is in the range of around $218,000 a year, so that's a pretty substantial cost. If they were out there doing road berming for more than 1 month, that cost could skyrocket pretty quickly. We do have a need for a new road grader. The current machine that we have is around 40 years old. It's a 1980-something machine. It's around a $550,000 expenditure. I use the cost of $27,000 a year annually over the course of 20 years, so I kind of amortize that. But if we paid that all up front or in a larger sum at the outset, the cost will go up overall from that $500,000 bare bones estimate. The storm pond retrofitting is roughly around $35,000 a year. That's probably 2 ponds, potentially 3. Again, that's on a cycle of 3 ponds per year over, say, a 20-year period. But again, we should be doing ponds 5 to 10 years. So again, that's the conservative estimate. The GIS mapping, there is not only the potential to maybe bring that intern in like we used to have, and the equipment necessary. We estimate that to be around $45,000 a year. And they would be able to, again, go out and map the system, maintain that mapping, be able to put in all the information from developments and residential subdivisions, things like that, and be able to really kind of get a handle on our GIS system and our overall system mapping. There may be the need to camera lines, even at a very conservative estimate of 17 to 20,000 linear feet. That's only 3 miles of line. That cost could be anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000, give or take. And then the other large one is stream bank restoration. We estimate that annually that could cost around $150,000 a year. And that's, again, something we're looking at now. We're doing it in Duff Park. I think there's also a project in Bear Hollow. 1,200 to 1,400 linear feet, which is not a substantial distance, costs around $150,000 a year. And again, those are kind of bare bones, absolute minimum costs on some of these things. And that total is, as I said, over $500,000. When you incorporate the work that Public Works completes as it relates to pipes and the equipment, and the materials necessary to do pipe work, and some of the other inlet work that they do, they go out and do inlet work not only before our paving projects, but also at other times of the year. They do stormwater cleanouts when we have storm events, things like that. None of that is even incorporated into that $500,000 figure. So when I say at the very most conservative number, that really is a reflection of that. I would think that number is probably going to fall somewhere between $700,000 to even $850,000. Again, that's where the CIP number came from. That's probably a more realistic estimate when we really drill down on what our stormwater cost would be annually. And again, keeping up with the permitting and trying to stay ahead of the DEP, has its own kind of portion of why we need to ramp up the repairs and stay on top of things. So again, I hope I'm answering your question. I'm trying to elaborate as I go simply because I think it's all relevant to the discussion.
I only have 2 more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the cost of the aerial survey that do you have an estimate on what that cost would be, or if we did it in-house versus outsourcing?
I don't have that cost. Now, that's something that I can certainly come back to council with. That is a big component of this, and certainly I wanted to have that cost available. But I want to first confirm with our engineer whether we have the ability to do that in-house. If so, it would be a minimal cost, I would think. We do have GIS mapping software, and we have a system in place, as I've described. To be able to do it within our own GIS system, it is possible. It may require a few layers of mapping to be added in, and then there's kind of an algorithm or a kind of an input that allows it to kind of extrapolate the the impervious surface. But so I know of the methodology and how that functions. I don't know whether we have the ability to do that internally. If not, I would imagine many of the engineering firms that we work with probably have that capacity. There are also other GIS software providers out there that could do that same thing. So it's not a cost that I have offhand, but it is something that I think we might be able to do internally, and if not, there are providers out there.
Okay. That kind of seems like step one.
It would be step one, that's correct.
Okay, I think my last question. So I'm assuming that the reason that we're looking at implementing a fee, or it's being brought to us to discuss, is because our current budget cannot really provide for this.
I would agree with that.
So have you looked at other communities to see what they're doing, what their fees are like, and how they manage this whole process? Because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel.
That's right, yeah, so that's exactly what we are doing. The draft ordinance that you have in your support documents and a lot of the literature that I send over all comes from either manuals that were provided by the state, by the SPC, which is the Southwest PA Commission, and they have kind of a stormwater program as well. There are a lot of different stormwater guides that are out there that are published by the various water resource entities and, again, the state. They contain not only information about how to implement the fee, the way the ordinance should be crafted and designed, how to include things like the credits and otherwise, and then they do discuss the different municipalities and some of their fees as well. And so we've used the different literature as guidance to kind of get to this point now where we have the conceptual framework in place. Many of the municipalities that we've looked at implement fees anywhere from $3 per month up to the most is typically around $12, $12.50 a month. And again, it's based on your EDU or your ERU, the equivalent residential unit. So that is the fee, the monthly fee for the single family home. But as it goes to a non-single family home, then it's, of course, measured by your impervious surface. So yes, we have quite a few resources that we're pulling from. We've looked at other municipalities and their ordinances and how they're structured. A lot of them are pretty similar, as you could imagine, because the state put out a lot of guidance on how to implement stormwater fees and what goes into the implementation, what the analysis should be as far as what that fee should cover and the various costs of the infrastructure. So most of the municipalities use that same template, if you will, to create their ordinance and implement all the stormwater requirements and fees. So we're using that same guidance, almost no different than the neighbors, like I said, Plum or Monroeville or some of the other municipalities.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have you done a revenue projection at all?
No, we haven't, and that's obviously a great question. It kind of alludes to what I was explaining to Jamie. The reason why we haven't been able to do that is because, unlike taxes or some of the other fees that might be collected in a municipality, all of the guidance and all of the literature that's published says that the fee needs to be applied equitably across the board to all the impervious surface property owners to all the property owners that have impervious surface in the community. Well, the only way we can do that is, of course, to map that out. I've done a very rough analysis, my own, using GIS and Google Maps and kind of being able to identify square footage of properties, but it's a very rough analysis. It gave me an idea conceptually of what a very large property is, what we're looking at for a large property versus all the way down to a medium-sized or a small property. And to do that analysis manually over the entire municipality would just be a little bit too cumbersome. So that's kind of step one, as Jamie mentioned, is to do that revenue analysis, we really need to kind of map the community. We didn't begin that process because I wanted to first have discussion with council, see if there is any desire to consider this fee or to kind of move that along. And if so, I think that's where we're going to go next, is we would do that aerial survey, start to get an idea of the lay of the community for impervious surface, and then from there, once we know how much area we're working with, we can start to then drill down on what an equivalent residential unit would consist of, and then in turn what the fee associated with that would be. So the revenue projection is kind of the next step, provided that council wants to, at least has a desire to move this a little bit forward and see what we're looking at.
I have one more question.
Please.
Okay. So say that all takes place and it's done, we come up with the ERU, we put it in, how long do you estimate that fee staying at that level without it having to be increased?
I think that at the outset, to answer that question, I think at the outset, if we can establish an accurate ERU and we can then identify revenue projections, the goal would be to try to keep it pretty consistent for at least the first number of years, probably setting a fee that would stay in place for at least one permit cycle, 1 5-year period at the very least. Now, the goal overall would be to try to keep that fee from fluctuating too much, whether up or down. Certainly, again, the community doesn't want to hear of any fee going into place. They certainly don't want to hear of a fee going into place and staying there in perpetuity, but ultimately we have to maintain our system. So the primary goal is once we set our revenue projections, we know a lot about our expenditures as it relates to the system. The goal would be to try to set a fee that would be pretty close to accurate for a period of time. We don't want to go and modify that. And again, every time we change a fee or a tax, no different than the school or the county, the community doesn't want to see that. They like the stability. So the goal would be to try to get an accurate figure, set that fee, and try to keep that in place for a period of time. Ideally, it would be at least one permit cycle, if not longer. So, and I think some of the municipalities, again, just to maybe ease the concerns of any community member listening, a lot of the municipalities that implemented fees, we haven't really seen those fees fluctuate too much going forward. You can set a fee and try to work within the constraints of that budget and move forward, and provided you don't have any truly extenuating circumstances or any truly substantial stormwater events or things like that, just like anything else, you try to work within that budget and stay in that framework. So that would be the goal.
Okay. Mac? Jamie, she kind of got to my question, but a piggyback to that question was the linear square footage of our lines in Murraysville comparison to same size and scope community that we could compare ourselves to. Do we have a lot more linear square footage of stormwater lines or less? I mean, we're a big community with, not necessarily in the commercial corridor as much as just everywhere, but you still have to have lines out there. So
I will tell you that I don't know that answer offhand. I don't want to put Bill on the spot. If you do have that.
The more dense the area would be, the more the linear footage of those lines would be.
Would you want to stay?
very good.
Sorry, you want to or sit here?
I'm going to sit with you.
There you go. That works.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
More or less, the more the dense the area would be, the more of the lineage foot you would have of pipe. When we get out towards the country, we're using the ditches that carry the water and control the water to where we need to put them into our outlets. So somebody that had a dense population in a smaller area may have more footage than we would have.
Yeah.
Because like you said, we're using a lot of ditches and whatnot.
That makes sense. Mike, another question is when you were saying about adjusting the fee or Jamie had mentioned, how do you gauge that? Like a business, it's all just based on that unit of measurement, right? Like, so if a business purchased a bunch of property and it wasn't parking lots and everything, and then all of a sudden, 5 years later, they pave the whole upper part, that would be implemented on that footage as well, which would go up.
Correct. It would
as
essentially
the
like be
business
reassessed, if you will.
Right.
So somebody buys a massive parcel of farmland, whatever it may be, but it doesn't have impervious surface, then their fee would not be as substantial, or it would be very minimal. But if they go and put a plaza in there with all parking lots, then of course now they're putting into the system, they've created impervious area, and it would be reassessed at whatever that square footage would be.
So it kind of controls itself as it goes up in that.
Yeah, and that's all part of, I kind of have said it, but reiterate it, that's the goal that the state requires when you implement a stormwater ordinance, that it's equitable across the board so that regardless of the type of property, the type of use, it really just comes down to the impervious surface and the amount of water that's not going into the ground on that property.
Are there any grants or any money out there that we could look to apply for to help us with the stormwater management?
Another good question, but unfortunately, there's not much funding out there for stormwater management. Now, we did get some grant funding. We put it towards some stormwater projects. Other municipalities, can do the same, but there is not a dedicated source of funds for stormwater projects, or at least not a direct one. A lot of the critique when the MS4 requirements were put in place by the state, a lot of the critique from municipalities was that it was an unfunded mandate. And so for a period of time, we have been able to get by without putting a fee in place or working towards that. Other municipalities maybe weren't so fortunate, and fees had to go into place right away. So again, without kind of, being too critical of the state, but that's the reality of it, is that it was an unfunded mandate. The state came down on all the MS4 communities. There are, I think, over 1,000 in the state, and put in requirements that now everybody has to do a certain level of improvement to their stormwater system, and they didn't really create a funding source to help address that. So other communities kind of scrambled at the outset. We're now to the point, not necessarily scrambling, but trying to stay ahead of it and address it properly. So we've kind of reached that threshold as well.
Michael, just once again, our MS4 permit, it's good now for how long?
It's a 5-year window, and it was just renewed earlier this year.
It was just renewed. So we have 5 years before, meaning if we were to get into any penalties for not having it, meaning you have to have it, but we don't have to have it.
But I'll explain it. It's a little bit different from that. So the permit itself, it's not that it bought us a 5-year window of compliance. There are requirements each year. The state can conduct inspections throughout that time. We have to do reporting throughout that time period as well. So the permit, in some ways, it's an ongoing thing. It has a 5-year window, but there are requirements to upkeep and maintain that permit, not only through improvements to the stormwater infrastructure, but also even outreach and educational components, which is why if you step out in the lobby and you see the stormwater bulletin we have out there, and it provides tips and feedback about, when you wash your car to not wash, soap down the catch basin and things like that. So the permit itself does have a 5-year window, but throughout that entire time period, there is oversight and there are requirements to stay in compliance. Once that 5-year window expires, essentially you have to get a new permit, and there are additional set of requirements assessed. And again, with the goal, at least from the state standpoint, to continue to reduce infiltration into the system. So every year, it gets a little bit more difficult to try to find ways to reduce runoff or to reduce infiltration. As it relates to, again, some more dense and urban communities, they struggle to find ways to reduce runoff because they're built out and they don't have as many mechanisms available to them, which is through the municipal circles that they will run a street sweeper all year round just to kind of maintain compliance and keep the roads clean, because it gives them credit towards their permit. So that's a little bit of a digression, but all of that to say, it's not a 5-year permit where we just find ourselves at the end of that 5 years either in compliance or not. It's kind of an ongoing process.
Well, not to get into minutia too much, but if you were to have an aerial photograph and you would identify my house, I have a smaller driveway, relatively small house for Marysville. But my lot is, let's say, 1/3 of an acre. My house is 10% of that or less, okay? Whereas Giant Eagle, if their area of their lot is the building structure and the parking lot, it's 95% impervious.
That's right.
So that would be taken into account in the algorithm, blah, blah, blah?
It would be. So, and I'll try to explain that as succinctly as I can. But essentially the way these ordinances are all implemented throughout the state, when we identify one equivalent residential unit, one EDU or one ERU, I say EDU, that's the terminology in some ordinances, that's equivalent dwelling unit. So they're interchangeable. When we establish a square footage area for that, that applies to a single-family residential home. And there are some homes that are certainly more than that square footage and some that are less. But throughout these ordinances, throughout the state, assign a single dollar value, a single residential unit to each single-family home. So if your home is a smaller footprint, regardless of the size of your lot, your property, whether it's the roof or your driveway, it's assigned one equivalent residential unit. And that's the same for all of the single-family residential properties in the community. So there may be a home that's 5,000 square feet, but it's assigned one as its value. As it relates to the other properties, non-single-family residential properties, that's carved out separately in the ordinance. It's a separate designation. It's all non-single-family homes. And there it goes by the specific amount of square footage of impervious surface. So to your example, a Giant Eagle parking lot or another business, all of the impervious surface, whether it be curbs, sidewalks, parking lot, rooftop, anything that's like that is part of that analysis. And it's assessed the square footage amount. And then in turn, you divide that by our EDU number, whether it's 3,000 square feet, and you get your actual ERU number. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but if that's confusing, please let me know. So what I mean by that is the single-family homes are assessed $1 amount, or again, one ERU, which is a single dollar amount per month. If that number is $5, then every single-family home is $5 per month over the course of the year. The non-residential are assigned a value based on impervious surface. However, it's important to note, in the ordinance, there will be an appeal process. So if anybody feels that their property is assessed at the wrong amount of impervious surface, there will be a mechanism that we will create. There are a few ordinances we've talked about already that could be, guidance could be pulled from that. But there will be an appeal process. So if somebody does disagree with their quote-unquote assessment, there will be a mechanism for them to challenge that administratively and even all the way up to the courts if need be. So that's essentially how that works. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Other than that, I don't have a question, but I guess my statement would be just being what maybe some of us are thinking of. I would rather go with the goal of no fee, but that's easy to say. But I know what you're asking us to say here now. Are we willing to spend some money to evaluate that we're going to do it, or we're going to do it anyway? I don't know that that's been decided, right?
Correct. That's the decision at hand. I mean, this is certainly the first discussion that we've had on this topic. In order for me to drill down a bit further on what it's going to look like dollars and cents wise, unfortunately, the best way to do that is to have that aerial survey. So that would be the next step. If council does have an interest in seeing this to the next step, that's what it would be. Short of doing that, the only other way to really get that analysis done and try to identify a fee structure would be to try to manually do it, I suppose, cutting some costs. But I think if there is a desire from council to see this to the next step, you may be willing to consider a fee going into place, recognizing the needs of the municipality and the budgetary constraints, then I would ask that at least authorized to kind of move forward, conduct an aerial survey, and start to at least identify what a fee structure might look like. So I think the decision at hand, again, it's a discussion item, but I think the decision or the feedback from council should be, whether there's a recognition that we do have some budgetary constraints, we have a lot of infrastructure that we need to address, and we may need an alternate source of funding, or from my standpoint, from a staffing standpoint, the recommendation is that we probably do need, unfortunately, another source of funding to address this issue, and the stormwater fee is probably what is warranted. Again, I know that's not going to be something that would be well received by the community, and we recognize that. the last thing I want to do is come in here and suggest, additional fees to the residents or the property owners here. I know that won't sit well. I certainly wouldn't want to pay additional fees either. But unfortunately, the municipalities, kind of caught up in that same vortex of economic constraints and rising costs and, the need to perform the work.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah,
Can I ask
let 'em
another
roll.
question? I promise. I'm almost
No, I
done.
mean, let's have it out tonight. Let's really have this discussion, yeah.
Okay, so you had said previously that we were kind of delayed in our pond retrofitting and things like that. Is this because of a lack of funds to do it, a lack of man hours to do it, I won't say poor, not the right scheduling that's in play?
I think it's a combination of factors and really nothing outweighing more than the others. Again, trying to keep costs down. I know it was only several years ago that the municipality modified its tax structure, going from kind of the property tax base to the EIT tax base. That was a big change for the community. We kind of had to weather that storm and kind of adapt to that. And so I think that, within the last few years, we've talked about this fee, but it just didn't seem like the timing was right coming off of the heels of that. Prior to that, I can't say specifically that I know the reason, but I would suspect, based on everything that I know about the municipality and our budget, there were ways to fit it within the budget and try to kind of keep things to a minimum as far as the amount of work we're doing and the way that we kind of configured things. I think we've just kind of outgrown that. Every year that goes by, the requirements from the state, the PA one-call system and having the system mapped out properly, it's starting to catch up with us a little bit. Again, storm ponds, as I said, we've been doing a few each year. It's kind of not addressing the elephant in the room as it relates to those storm ponds. So I think we recognize that we've now reached that point where the dust has kind of settled on the way we've taxed the community and kind of modifying those taxes and getting things in place, seeing how that shakes out from a budget standpoint, and then also having the rising costs and the infrastructure needs kind of all culminating at this time. So it wasn't necessarily anything specific, a lack of oversight or a lack of initiative. It's just kind of we've kind of played it slow for a little while, and now we're kind of at that point where we probably do need to fully engage in our stormwater efforts, not only from a requirement standpoint, but even from a needs standpoint.
That brings me to my next question.
Sure.
So what are the consequences if during this 5-year period we don't meet the requirement? Or we meet it every year, but when the renewal comes up, we fail?
Well, I would say, foremost, I don't think that we're going to fail. I mean, at the end of the day, again, between our general fund budget, our capital reserves, we would find a way to stay in compliance if need be. I mean, I don't think that we would want to get to that point where we fall out of compliance with the state. If so, we risk them cracking down on us from fines and additional oversight, or maybe more regulations put into place. Similar to what we see with the consent decree and the sewage authority, once the state gets involved, it can certainly make things a lot more difficult and onerous. So I would say that we don't want to progress to that point. Even if a fee weren't in place, we're going to scramble and do whatever we can to try to stay in compliance. But it's just going to continue to put a strain, again, on our other budgetary items. That could mean that if we got to that point, scrambling to stay in compliance and making sure that we put forth all the efforts we have to, in municipal circles, that would just mean less investment into other things in the community, taking money away from parks or playgrounds or roads or things like that. So we're hoping that it doesn't come to that point. But to answer your question specifically, it would probably mean more oversight or even fines from the state, things like that. So obviously we don't want to get to that point, and we want to try to stay ahead of it.
Thank you.
Just one quick question. In your, and I know the mapping is and the inventory is probably step one, like we've been talking about. I agree with that. Are there waterways or ditches that carry stormwater near resident properties that may be untouchable by the municipality. Perhaps they're like under Westmoreland Conservatory, or do those exist in the municipality or
I
not?
would say that they
Yes.
may, but Bill could probably
Yes,
answer
they
that
do. And what normally has to happen there is we actually have to permit those through the Conservation Authority to actually work in them.
Okay,
We're currently doing that right now on some property along Sardis Road.
that's the area I was kind of considering, because you implement this fee, that those people are going to be here right away to say, why is it still flooding? But got it.
Michael, an estimate of the aerial mapping, are we talking 5,000 or 30,000?
I would think it'd be on the low end of that. I don't know with certainty, and that's something that I'm going to start to gather the figures on. And I would get back to council before any expenditure, just to be sure. But I would think it'd be on the low end of that, and it may not even be that much. I'm not quite sure. I think they just take existing data. It's not as if they have to go out and fly the area and get new maps or things like that. There are plenty of GIS or aerial maps, I should say, available. And from what I understand, it's kind of an aggregation of maps to ensure that they're getting it accurately. So it could be anything from county GIS maps, aerial surveys from GIS systems, all the way down to even Google Maps and some other types of overhead maps. So I don't know that answer. I wish I did. That's obviously one of the more important questions, but I think it will be on the low end. If it were something substantial on that higher end, then certainly I'm going to come back to council and seek approval for that, and we can weigh out that decision at that time.
Okay. Any final questions or concerns from council? So are we in agreement to at least proceed with investigating this, looking into the aerial investigation and seeing what they come up with GIS-wise? So Carl, you're not in favor of
No.
proceeding at all? No. Okay. Is anyone else just a hard no? Okay, so I think at this point, I think we should just proceed then with the aerial GIS survey, see what we can do here. I can just summarize and say, again, this is a fee, not a tax. You know, this wasn't taken lightly. You know, any monies collected here have to go to stormwater. And if you wonder why these sort of things are now in law that the state passes as an unfunded mandate, go to Millville during a rainstorm. And essentially, we are required to try and prevent that, so that's where we're coming from. It seems to me that $3 to $12 is a pretty fair range, so I would say let's look into it and see where it goes. Is everyone, Carl, I understand you're a hard no. Is everyone else just in agreement to go forward and investigate?
I wouldn't even say I'm a hard no. I'm kind of a soft no.
Okay, off now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need the information before we can make any decisions. I think it's impossible to know until we look at it.
Agree.
Yeah, same here. And I would just add, Michael, the detail, preparedness, what you shared today was very well said. So thank you. And of course, Bill, your support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank
Yeah,
you
very much.
guys. Yep, Ollie.
Sure, thank you. No, a lot of work from staff that went into this to try to kind of drill down and start to get the process moving. But I fully agree. I think council understands the next step is going to be the most crucial in trying to identify what kind of a fee structure could even be put in place. And the only way to do that is, again, when it comes to something like this, is to kind of do the mapping. So I think we'll start to look into that. We'll get some feedback to council, let you know what that may entail. If there's a cost associated, what that would be, and then we'll take the next step from there if there's a decision made to move forward.
So Dayton, coming out of here, we do it, or they're going to go with the aerial, or
Yeah.
we're just going to get a price first? How's that work? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
we're giving the okay as long as it's not an astronomical.
Yeah, no, I can get the prices and I can report back to council. That's not a problem. Again, because I don't know exactly what that looks like, and so I think it's fair that council wants to know that in advance. So I'll drill down on that. I think we'll get that answer pretty quickly, and then we'll go from there. So,
Yep. Sounds like a plan.
okay.
Great job, Mike.
Yeah, really awesome.
Really good.
Okay. That will end it for our workshop items this evening.
Like, okay.
That brings us to our council action items. 13A will be the first one. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to advertise to fill the vacancy on the Parks and Recreation Commission, said term to expire December 31st, 2024.
Second.
Let's go Carl and Jamie. Mike?
Yes, pretty straightforward item. We do want to advertise the vacancy on the Parks Commission. I recognize that the term expires at the end of the year. However, they have been having a difficulty getting a quorum. So even if somebody is appointed and there's only one meeting left in the year, it would still be helpful because they haven't had a couple meetings in recent months. And so the recreation director has kind of been pushing to get that position filled. I would suggest, just based on the process to fill the vacancy, that the likely candidate filling this position would probably be somebody that you would consider to reappoint at the beginning of the year anyway. So I think the goal that we would seek here is to fill the vacancy with the idea in mind that that person would probably continue on into a new term. Right. So we just wanted to move the process forward, even if it only saves a month or two.
Yeah, it really has been a struggle. It's been two months that we didn't have enough people to have the meeting, and they had to cancel it at the last minute. So
Yeah,
it's
because
something
there's
we
Boy
really.
Scouts out there that need their Eagle Scout projects.
That's
just
right.
saying.
Yeah,
Not that I have
absolutely.
one of those.
But, absolutely. Why let months go to waste? So any questions or concerns about this one?
Nope.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to 15A. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to authorize advertisement for ordinance number 1092-24, an ordinance accepting the streets in the Hillstone Village development.
Thank you, Jamie and Matt. Mike?
Yes, this is the advertisement for an ordinance to adopt the various streets. They are North Valley Court, South Valley Court, Harrison Court, Hillstone Village Drive, and Clubhouse Court. The developer has requested that the municipality accept the streets into the municipal road system. The construction of those streets was inspected by the engineering department. The roads met all the requirements of the municipality and the municipal standards for road construction.
Do we have the public works resources to support those roads?
We do. Just like anything else, the more roads that we continue to add into our street system, there's more roads that are either ours to maintain, plow, and repair. So if you look over to Bill there, I'm sure he'll be nodding his head absolutely, because they've had a similar staffing level for quite some time, yet the network of roads like that, Jason, with Bill in the room, you're going to get a pretty resounding answer that
There it comes.
there may be that it is putting a strain on the Public Works Department. But go ahead, Bill.
Okay, as of this year, with the acceptance of the roads on Klein Hollow and these roads that we're about to accept, we have gone past our what they have set years ago was every 13 miles we would gain a truck and a new employee. We have that set up for the CIP for this year coming. We're going to start off with the truck and the employee, and then in next year's budget we'll bounce that up to a truck driver, because that's where he would actually operate as a truck driver to supply the truck. So unfortunately, you brought up something that has come. It only happens, once in a blue moon, but it's going to happen this year.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good enough. All right. Yeah. Okay, any other questions or concerns about the acceptance of the Hillstone Village development? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Motion passes, it is unanimous. We have any new business? We do have an executive session tonight to discuss legal matters. There will be no action coming out of that executive session, so can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Jamie and Jason. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Or adjourn. Thanks, everybody.